and show me.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the very first Mansfield Today on YouTube. Nice to have you along with us. And best way to start is with somebody who I've worked off and on with for years and years and years. On a Monday, what we're going to be concentrating on is business. It's the beginning of a new week. Let's see what's been happening and what we can expect out of this business week. And we're joined by leading award-winning business journalist Chris Gibbons. Chris, winter certainly hit us here in Joburg. I believe you guys down in the Western Cape had a decent-ish weekend, but you got forecasts, rain forecasts and a bit of cold coming.
Good morning, Jeremy. Yes, good to be on the show. Thank you for having me. Absolutely, we had a glorious weekend in parts down here in the Western Cape, but I gather the rain is coming in later on today. And it'll be with us tomorrow. We had good rain last week as well. Western Cape, of course, you know, it's a winter rainfall area. We need the rain, so it's very welcome.
Yeah. Now, we're into the start of the last week of May. This year's, I mean, it's scary to think that this year is nearly half done. What are we looking like, bearing in mind that parts of the globe are emerging from this pandemic and other parts of the globe are still in the grip of it?
The main theme is this counterbalance, if you like, between the economies that are emerging from the pandemic and those that are still in the grip or going back into pandemic. As the larger, more developed economies like the United States, Europe, Britain begin to get their populations vaccinated, their economies start to emerge, and the governments turn off the tap, the easy money tap, which they've been pumping their economies throughout the pandemic with. And that sparks the fear of inflation. Inflation is a terrible demon once it gets out of control because it devalues your money. The rand or the pound or the dollar that you earn today is only worth 90 cents tomorrow because of inflation. So there's a big worry about inflation taking hold. Not so much here in South Africa, of course. We have our inflation under control, as we saw when the Reserve Bank held the repo rate 3.5% last week. Yeah. Our problem is actually getting the economy going. We have all sorts of structural problems that we need to deal with, which I'm sure you're well aware of. We need growth and we need a little bit of inflation as a result of that. So it's a contrast in I guess, the developed world versus the developing world.
A busy week at the end of last week for the JSE, wasn't it? Eh?
We had a slew of results. I've got them in my hands. I've got Investec, I've got Richemont, I've got Dis-Chem, and I've got Old Mutual. Some very good numbers from Investec, I thought. The headline on that one, I'll just pull up the number here. The 1.64 billion pounds. Remember, they're listed in London, so the numbers will come out in pounds. Slightly down on the previous year's 1.8 billion, but the numbers at the bottom of the column are looking quite good. And a similar picture as well for Richemont. Richemont reports in euros because they're also listed in Luxembourg. Sales 13 billion euros from 14 billion the previous year. But down at the bottom of the column, you have a very decent increase in headline earnings per share, 2.328 euros from 1.742 euros. So really good performance there by Richemont. Old Mutual, this was a voluntary trading update as opposed to results, and their guidance in that trading update was that their core earnings, they have a special word for them, they call them the key performance indicators, up 48%. And that's despite paying out some 7 billion rand in COVID-related death claims. 7 billion, did I say 7 billion? Let me just check that number. Yep, I think that is the number there. So yeah, good figures there from Old Mutual, as I say. And Dis-Chem also putting in a very good performance, 26.3 billion revenue, up from 24 billion the previous year. Headline earnings per share, 77.8 cents, up from 69.6 the previous year. And all of this through the pandemic, through the lockdown, through all of those problems. So South African companies showing deep resilience, in my opinion.
What did the ratings agencies have to say on Friday night? Because they had a pronouncement, didn't they?
They did indeed. Two of the big three. This was Fitch and S&P, and they left the ratings unchanged, pretty much as expected. Double B minus. The point of that is, of course, really the outlook is what's important. S&P has the outlook stable. Fitch has the outlook negative. So we have some work to do there to impress Fitch to get back into investment grade. We're 3 notches into investment grade, and it's going to take several years, assuming we ever get the structure of the economy right. It's going to take several years to get that rating back up. But at least we're kind of holding our own. They paid tribute to the Reserve Bank. They have noticed the government's attempts to cut spending, bring spending under control. Whether that'll work or not remains to be seen. And they're also looking at the inflows from the mining industry, extra tax being collected. So all in all, not too bad. Could have been a lot worse, I think.
Chris, let's come back to the COVID and the vaccination thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, because you've now got the private sector in South Africa getting involved in the vaccinations, and some really massive plans coming out of the IMF from a world vaccination point of view.
This is the plan which was put to the G20 and the Eurozone folk just before the weekend by IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. And she wants $50 billion to close the gap between those developed nations that we mentioned a little bit earlier, who are getting their vaccination programs together, and the rest of the world, including, of course, us. And she points out that if you invest this kind of money, the benefit to the global economy of a recovery by 2025, according to her figures, is something like many trillions of dollars. Get the figure on the screen there. It really is an absolute jackpot. She wants $4 billion upfront for COVAX, and she explains to the developed nations, the rich nations, if you like, that it's in their interest to make this money available, because you just get the entire global economy going and trillions of dollars that start to flow. So spend a bit now and you'll get a huge dividend in 2 or 3 years' time.
Let's take a look forward. What locally first? What can we expect this week? What's happening?
Well, coming up this week, Jeremy, I'm just looking at my diary here. We've got the Business Confidence Index from the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That's due out later on today. We have the leading business cycle indicator coming out tomorrow. And then later in the week, we have the producer price inflation numbers. What are we looking at there? Probably 6.7%, something of that ilk, up from 5.2 in March. Those are the key economic indicators on our calendar. And we have government wage talks. We have Eskom wage talks, we have gold sector wage talks. There's an awful lot of wage talking going on at the moment, and the unions are being fairly militant, as they tend to be. We have a history of militant trade unions in this country. They're digging their heels in, and for me, the key one is not so much the government, but it's Eskom, because in previous negotiations where they have stuck, there's suddenly been a rash of sabotage and power stations not working, and Eskom has more than enough problems on its plate as it stands, without union members fiddling with the switches, if you understand what I mean.
What's happening with CNA? Chris, give us a brief update there.
CNA, yes, once one of the darlings of the South African retail sector. CNA, I once worked for a book company many years ago, and they were by far and away our most important, biggest customer. They dominated so many sectors of publishing and all that kind of stuff. And now they are just an absolute shadow of where they used to be. They've been taken private, taken off the JSE some years ago. Their main investor has just bailed for an absolutely minimal amount of money. And now the board has had a big fallout with the CEO, a guy called Benjamin Trisk. You may remember him at Exclusive Books. He was the CEO there for a while. They say that he attempted to put CNA in business rescue without their permission. He denies that. They say that he tendered his resignation last month. He denies that too. Everyone is unleashing the packs of lawyers, and it's all getting very, very ugly for this once great company.
Once again, we have the lawyers making the money. Let's take a look at the international front, Chris.
Well, what do we have coming up there? Again, I'm looking at my diary there. We have US figures, US consumer confidence for May. That's out on the 25th, tomorrow, 27th. Big one here. This is the US GDP growth for the second quarter. Everyone will be watching that very, very closely indeed. As you well know, when the Americans catch a cold, the rest of us sneeze. Well, when Americans sneeze, we all catch a cold. The size of that economy is so dominant on the global stage that whatever happens there affects the rest of us. To a lesser extent, we have German GDP rate year on year. There's a forecast there of 3%, minus 3%, from minus 3.3. So there should be some improvement in the German economy, I think. But of course, the one that really has my attention, and there's not been too many headlines about it, the talks that are underway between the United States and Iran. President Biden, attempting to get the Iranians back into the deal which Donald Trump threw away so abruptly. Really quite extraordinary behavior by Trump. But they're trying to get that deal back on track, and that will have a direct bearing on the oil price. You'll see the oil price start to soften, as it did a couple of points last week, around $67 a barrel at the moment. That's Brent crude, and you'll start to see that come down. I would imagine if the Iranians can be persuaded to come back inside the tent rather than being outside the tent.
Chris Gibbons, our business journalist, on a Monday here on Mansfield Today. If you've got any questions that you'd like to put to Chris, you can get hold of him at business@Mansfield2day. Remember, that's with the number 2, Mansfield2day.com. Business@Mansfield2day.com. Chris, have a good weekend. Lovely speaking to you, and we'll chat to you next Monday.
Many thanks, Jeremy. I'll look forward to it. Have a good week yourself.
Cherry, bye. Bye-bye. And bye-bye from us. We'll catch you tomorrow when we'll be joined by our legal expert, Advocate Lance Brogden, who'll be talking legal issues right here on Mansfield Today. If you like the show, then like it on a Facebook site, Mansfield2day.com, and share it with your friends. Tell them about it, because we've got loads of information and loads of fun coming up. We'll catch you again tomorrow with our legal section right here on Mansfield Today. Have a wonderful day. The rest of it, whatever's left of it. Until next time, bye-bye.
I'm searching for the spirit of a great heart to hold and keep me by. I'm searching for the spirit of a great heart.